I have an announcement to make. Today, I made the decision to hand in my resignation at my current employer. Over time, I have faced challenges that have significantly impacted my mental well-being, which include ongoing experiences of microaggressions. After much reflection, I have decided to prioritize my mental health and well-being, which necessitates stepping away from my position. I am sharing this because I know there are countless others like me who work in institutions that pretend to care about diversity, inclusion, and equality, and who don't. There are others like me who may need to rethink their careers in 2025. I am committed to advancing decolonial change globally. Please keep me in mind for any speaking opportunities. You can view my CV and websites in the link in my bio. Naomi. I think why I became viral on LinkedIn for this post is for two reasons. First of all, a lot of people have been saying it's very brave of me to share my trauma, my work trauma, and this video is going to be discussing more of that work trauma. I obviously have to be careful about what I say. I'll be honest, I don't know what's going to happen. There have been people who have said that potentially I could take this further. A lot of people, when they asked me, oh, what was your job that you resigned from? And I said, oh, I worked in a library. They're shocked because they have this idea that libraries are very safe places. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great librarians. And when I think about public libraries in particular, these places that are community hubs, they're third spaces, they're spaces that can provide much needed education for the community, especially those who have been excluded from schools, universities, members of the community that are quite vulnerable. Public libraries, like I said, are very important. I worked in an academic library. If you are already familiar with the colonialism that is embedded within academia and universities, then it'll come as no surprise that university libraries, as an extension of universities, are problematic. And I would actually really recommend you looking up knowledge justice, disrupting library and information studies through critical race theory. I'm going to put the link in my bio. You can actually read this book for free. But this highlights why academic libraries in particular are embedded with white supremacy. Something that I unfortunately experienced in my day job. Like I said in my LinkedIn post, I frequently experience microaggressions. I frequently experience hair touching, just being otherized. And for those who are like, oh, it's minor, like, I think the problem with the word microaggressions is because of the word micro in front. Microaggressions, for anybody who's unfamiliar with the term, relate to the quote-unquote unintentional forms of racism. However, in my case, and for many other cases, when you're frequently stung by a bee, your limbs are going to swell. One sting maybe isn't so bad, but when you're regularly stung, it's going to have an effect. So microaggressions, whether that can be mixing up names, this idea that all marginalized people look the same, whether it could be hair touching, whether it can be jokes, whether it can be invalidating experiences, which is what led me to resign, and I'll get into that as the video progresses. These all take a psychological impact. They really take a psychological impact. I had been going through that for a long time. I had worked at my previous employer here for nearly 2 years now, and I had been going through these type of issues. However, what really was the nail in the coffin was recently in the UK during the summer there were race riots. White supremacists were rioting throughout the UK. I noticed how my work did not reach out to me, did not reach out to ask if I'm okay. Even though black and brown people were literally getting beaten up. That was kind of the start of realizing that unfortunately I'm not truly cared about. My worth is only related to my labor, because I know a lot of people whose work made accommodations for them, especially in the NHS. My friend was telling me how managers in the NHS were sending colleagues home early, paying for taxis. That didn't happen at my work. The final straw though was when Donald Trump was elected. You guys who subscribe to my YouTube channel already know that I made a video discussing why I regret not voting for Kamala Harris, why I regret not supporting Kamala Harris. Upon reflection, it's a lot deeper. I have Indigenous American in me, and it's something that is strange because I kind of forget at times that I have Indigenous American in me, but when Donald Trump was appointed, I felt so heavy energetically that I think it was a reminder that, I have links to this country. So just for some background, my dad is Jamaican, my mum is Yoruba, mixed with white, Indigenous American and African American. My maternal grandmother was American, and she was a mixture of white, African American and Indigenous American. My grandmother was very fair-skinned and used to racialize herself as white. If you look into American history, there's this whole phenomenon called white passing, where people pretended to be white just because it was literally safer to pretend to be white. It was literally life or death when my grandmother was growing up. So I think that, coupled with the fact that a lot of Indigenous Americans have been wiped out, so that part of my ancestry very much is missing. Going back to Donald Trump being appointed, feeling very heavy, I reached out to my manager basically saying I needed pastoral support. And actually I made a LinkedIn post just saying during these tumultuous times, workplaces should be providing safe spaces for us. Just a space to reflect, a space to feel, seen, like an actual white supremacist is ruling the free world. Like, it's actually crazy. It has an impact emotionally, spiritually, it has an impact. And so I remember reaching out to my manager, just saying, I'm feeling stressed. And I just brought up how there's a lack of pastoral care at my workplace. Nobody checked on me during the riots. Nobody's checking in on me now that Donald Trump is president. And I guess it was just a cry for help almost. My manager, who is white, chose to not even say, I'm sorry that you're feeling this way. Basically chose to center themselves. Very white thing to do, center their white experiences, and I'm even going to quote, because I have all the receipts. Obviously, I'm trying not to necessarily go into explicit details by using identifiers. However, I've got all the receipts and I'm purposely keeping all the receipts. So when I reached out to my white manager saying, I think my workplace is extremely poor at offering pastoral support. With events like Donald Trump winning, no one bothers to check up on me and how it's impacting my mental health. Even during the summer when there were race riots and I was scared to leave my flat, No one asked me how I was. It's just business as usual. I'm extremely stressed and don't even want to be here today. Do you want to know their response? Thanks for the feedback. I'll think about it. Responses to current affairs can be such a personal thing, and I would hate to send a message that could be triggering. I also wouldn't want to assume anyone's political standpoint or frame something in a way that the person doesn't agree with. AKA, so white supremacists are rioting, but maybe you agree with that, Naomi. I don't want to assume. Okay. We talk a little bit more. I then say, I'm going to be honest, I think this politically correct response is disappointing. Black people were being beaten up. I'm gonna wait for the sirens to end. Black people were being beaten up over summer, and there is now an openly racist president, but is now being framed as a complicated issue. And this response is where red flag. My manager then replied, it sounds like we see it differently. No shit, babes. You're white, I'm black. Of course you're never going to understand how I see it, but it gets better. I would feel patronized if a manager messaged me individually about an issue they anticipated would affect me. It's not necessarily a decision I would want to have with them. This colorblind approach completely invalidated my experiences, basically thinking you can put yourself in my shoes. You are white. And again, it's just this reoccurring thing of when you say to white people, there is a problem, they will either become fragile, become defensive, or center their experiences. All three, in my personal and humble opinion, happened with this. But it gets worse. Over the next 24 hours, I proceeded to email my manager because I had handed in my resignation. My manager, though, then proceeded to gaslight me. Basically, pretended that this conversation almost didn't happen. Again, why I think this is a chance for us to reflect from a decolonial space. I think the problem with the world, and I've said this so many times in my videos, when it comes to the problem with the world is the fact that we can't hold a mirror to ourselves. We're so fragile, we're so defensive, we can't take accountability. And again, if you go back to my video about why I regret not supporting Kamala Harris, I even turn the mirror towards me and say, I regret. And, I don't want to go into that video. If you're interested, go and have a look. I'm somebody who can admit I'm in the wrong. My manager clearly can't. But unfortunately, this seems to be representative of a lot of people in their racial demographic, you can say, who just can't admit that they are reenacting white supremacy. They are creating microaggressions. They are biased, consciously or unconsciously. And when I raised it, instead of saying, sorry, you're right, Naomi, or you know what, Naomi, I've handled this wrong, we dig deeper into the lies we're telling ourselves. No, Naomi, we didn't even talk about you reaching out for support. We were speaking about a completely different issue, which is basically the gaslighting that occurred. I'm laughing just because how could I go back to a place where I'm literally being told almost I'm crazy, I'm imagining things. There's a lot of people though, unfortunately, who are like me, who are having to work in institutions that gaslight. I mean, I'll be honest, we're actually living in a society that gaslights us. I was having this discussion with my friend Erdem, who did a great presentation today about class at King's College, and this idea that capitalism gaslights us in the sense of it distracts us, it tries to use these tactics of divide and conquer, it tries to tell us that, capitalism is not the problem, it's other things that are problem, notably us, we're the problem. If we're not making a certain income, it's because we're not working hard enough. I mean, look at all these self-made millionaires and billionaires. It's this relationship between self and the wider world. I always say, if we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves. And in this case, people like my manager need to take accountability. And I think if we all took accountability, it does have a butterfly effect. The whole world would have to start to look in the mirror and admit that we are fucked up. This society needs to be radically rebuilt, transformed, decolonized. So now I'm a full-time educational content creator. And how I even made this decision is through a comment that I received on LinkedIn. I'm just gonna go back to the comment. It was a great comment from somebody called Helen and was just really nice. So Helen is a kindness and well-being coach. And I think we can admit we do need more kindness and well-being. We need more kindness towards victims of oppression. Helen said, I'll ask you a coaching question. What would success look like for you in the next year if you fully committed to Die for Art? And you guys know Die for Art is my business that I set up officially in August, where I help brands, creators and influencers discuss political issues.
Silence is not neutral. Silence is weakness. Silence will get you cancelled. Work with Die for Art to find your voice and to find your power through written or creative communication, or through just the self-belief that you can make a difference.
For me, it was always a decolonial business in the sense of I felt prohibited from really being my authentic self in universities and university libraries in comparison to the creative industry, where I felt I could be freer basically. So she asked me, what would next year look like if I fully committed to Die for Art? And what would it look like if you returned to a job? Which path feels more aligned with your values and long-term goals? And honestly, talking to you in a camera, being my most authentic self, sharing my lived experiences, hoping that it resonates with somebody, whether you're somebody who is like my manager and really needs to turn the mirror towards yourself, whether you're somebody who's like me, who has experienced microaggressions, who hates their job and maybe needs a career change in 2025. I really hope my words are piercing somebody, whoever is watching. By piercing your soul, you could say, I hope I'm creating change. I'm somebody who stands for change. I'm somebody who stands for liberation and freedom in all manners and areas of my life. And like I said, when I shared this post, it was so random. I was walking in the park with my friend tonight, and I said, you know what, I want to share this on LinkedIn. A part of me was like, should I just keep it hush hush? Again, because we're conditioned in this capitalist society where our worth comes from our job. There was a part of me that felt quite ashamed to admit that I'm basically jobless in a way, even though I'm not jobless. I am so full of purpose. That is my job. But I shared that LinkedIn post to basically cause reflection. And this is my role as a content creator. It is to pose these difficult questions, but to also guide people to healing. I want to guide people to healing, to self-healing. Like, even if my manager is watching this, I don't hate you. I'm truly disappointed. I truly thought you were my biggest ally. And I don't hold hate in my heart. I'm just very disappointed that this happened. Decolonial work is very holistic. And I remember saying this when I was public speaking at a conference, because I do a lot of public speaking, which is why on my LinkedIn I said, if you want to hire me for my public speaking, just look at my CV. I have spoken globally, literally. I've spoken in South Africa virtually, I've spoken in America virtually, and I know I'm going to be speaking in Canada probably soon, just because I am writing a book chapter that is going to be published in Canada. I'm committed to decoloniality across the globe, so I'm going to embark on this journey of freedom, which for me is doing what I love, which is educating people who may not necessarily have been touched by me being in the library, because as I've argued before, me being in an academic library is great for the students who had access to me, but we know that a lot of people cannot even get into universities. So I do want to be that quote-unquote accessible librarian. And in regards to this YouTube channel, I have a lot of goals that I want to achieve, and I do want to share what I'm going to be doing. Coming up, I am going to be doing basically a little book club on a book called A Woman is a School by Celine Simon. I'm sorry, Celine, if I'm not saying your name correctly. Celine is Lebanese, and this book is beautiful. It is a memoir and a cultural anthropological book by the Slow Factory founder, who is a war survivor and a child refugee, sharing endangered and discredited ancestral knowledge of the global South. And just quickly pivoting back to this book, this is actually why libraries are embedded with white supremacy, just because they were very much necessary for the colonial projects aimed to discredit ancestral knowledge, indigenous forms of knowledge. They came in with a Western epistemology. Epistemology, for those who don't know that word, is a fancy word for basically our ways of thinking about thinking. So the way we think about thinking, the way we think about knowledge, we are taught in universities and generally in life that knowledge comes from books. It doesn't come from the mind. It doesn't come from songs. It doesn't come from fables, stories, the oral traditions that my ancestors knew as valid forms of knowledge. Libraries came in and said, no, knowledge comes from books, written books by Western white men. So already, libraries have this white supremacy embedded within them. And then just nowadays, you can look up the statistics. It's something crazy, like 96 to 98% of librarians are white. That's in America and in the UK. So there's all these reasons why, I'll be honest, I'm not surprised that I've had to leave the toxic library that I was working at. But going back to librarianship in general, and what I was arguing at the beginning, how, librarianship in the sense of communicating ideas and educating people, that is something that I want to embed in this channel. So I do want to go through this book, and I've already read the introduction, and just from the introduction, which is called In the Name of Revolution, there are themes such as cell memory, the trauma that is embedded within cell memory, Frantz Fanon, Black Skins, White Masks, and how he discusses the psychological impact of assimilation and the lack of belonging. That was just in the introduction. So every week I am going to be breaking down a chapter, reflecting with you guys. If that's something that you think you would love, please subscribe to this channel. There are 9 chapters, and we are going to go through all of them every week. I also have a video discussing self-care coming up. I actually recorded this video when I was off work for my mental health. I remember going to the doctor when I was getting signed off, and the doctor saying, you really need to focus on what brings you joy, and YouTube brings me joy. So I recorded a video about the little things I was doing that were for my self-care. However, self-care is a topic that I've spoken about in conferences. The barriers to self-care, the guilt we feel. And if you are somebody who was working in an environment like me that has come out, I would say you need to be incorporating self-care, because stress, it lingers in our cells. Remember, I'm going to get into the trauma in our cell memory, especially if we've come from a whole generation and lineage of people who have had trauma embedded within them. If you're still working in a toxic environment, then listen, babes, you need to be doing self-care. And the video as well is very much focused for those who are invested in social change, who are activists. Self-care is an act of preservation. It's an act of political warfare. It's not self-indulgence. That's what I'm going to be discussing more in the video. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe. But yeah, I have aims for this channel, and this is why this video is not a negative. It is a sign of stepping out in faith and embracing a new chapter for 2025. And if this inspires anybody else to step into a new chapter, I appreciate that not everybody can just resign. We all have different lifestyles, different privileges. Like I said, I'm lucky enough that I have been already working on Die for Art, my business. So it's not as if I'm just in the vacuum, so to speak. I don't know what to do. I have no plan B. I have no options. I already was doing YouTube and viewing YouTube and content creation as a source of income, something that I enjoy to do. I know not everybody is of that same position as me. So maybe this is your sign to start to think of a plan B, to start to work on creating a safety net for yourself for the times when and if it just gets too much. You can step away into freedom. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe. I'm gonna see you for A Woman is a School book club. I'm going to see you soon for my self-care video. You can follow me on Instagram, Black and Gold Education, subscribe to this channel, and I'm just looking forward to sharing with you this new chapter. Thank you guys for listening. And lastly, I just want to say, I don't want sympathy, because unfortunately this is just a symptom of the world. If you do feel sorry for me, then I would say commit to a decolonial lifestyle, which means discussing these difficult issues. But more than discussing, because I'll be honest, my manager can quote a black academia. My manager thinks that they're very woke. I know this. They think that they're woke. So really it goes beyond discussing, it goes beyond the knowledge, it goes beyond the epistemology. It actually now in 2025 is about action. It is about being that ally that actively supports and protects marginalized identities and all identities. Remember, you guys know I'm very much pro-Palestine. A lot of people say that they care about racism, they care about this, but are silent. 2025 is not the time to be performative anymore.
Silence is not neutral. Silence is weakness. Silence will get you cancelled. Work with Decipher Arts to find your voice and to find your power through written or creative communication, or through just the self-belief that you can make a difference.